Is it safe to say the Cards, yes, the Arizona Cardinals, hold the cards of the 2023 NFL Draft, plus some thoughts on this quarterback class and, well, Jaxon Smith-Njigba. We expect him to go in round one, but how many receivers will go? That and more on today's episode of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi again, everyone, and welcome in to a Wednesday edition of Locked On NFL. He is Tony Wiggins. I'm James Rapien, and we have a ton to get to. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. And make sure you subscribe on YouTube, ring that bell for notifications, and follow wherever you get your podcasts. And let's dive on in, Tony, because the Arizona Cardinals have received trade inquiries, and we are a day away. This is the Wednesday edition, so a day away from the 2-week mark of the NFL draft. And, you know, it's just over 2 weeks away.
Right.
And the Arizona Cardinals, third, they're one of the teams in that top part of the draft that don't necessarily need a quarterback. They're not in the quarterback market with Kyler Murray signed to a long-term deal. So 6 teams reaching out, according to Adam Schefter, about trading that third overall pick. Like I said in the mention or in the opener, it seems like the Cards hold the cards. And full disclosure, I'm stealing that from you during our pre-draft meeting. I got to give you credit.
Well, first of all, you don't steal from me. When we come up with it, we come up with it, right? So just like if the Bengals would have gone to the Super Bowl, I'd have been like, hey, man, that's ours, right? Because
there we go.
It's both ours, right? No, seriously, though. But no, you're right. It's interesting to me because you said that the Arizona is not necessarily in the quarterback market. It sounds like me. You think they should be a little bit, but they're not. I think it's very interesting because it could be a number of teams either coming up to get what we believe is the second or the third quarterback, depending on what Houston does. One of those teams could be Houston that wants to come up from 12 and have the second and third pick, right? So I would really be interested in knowing which teams it is, because if it's Houston, that means they're going quarterback and somebody else, or somebody else and a quarterback. And I wonder how many other teams are coming up who aren't looking for quarterbacks in that position. So to say that they're in a little bit of a catbird seat, no pun intended, because they got the bird on the helmet. Shout out to Alex Clancy. But I do think they're sitting in a good position. And I know it's never good to say that about a team picking in the top 3 because it means they weren't good at all to be there. But this is a pretty decent draft for you to not need a quarterback and to be in the top 3, because that means you'll probably get the number 1 player on your board if you decide to stay.
Yeah, I certainly think they could do that. To me, what's interesting is the teams that are trying to move up. You know, Tennessee was rumored. Could the Colts do it? And I think that's the interesting one, because if you're Arizona and let's say you're prepared to use that third pick, maybe you could trick the Colts into giving you something because they want to get their quarterback and they don't want the Raiders or the Titans or the insert whatever team moving up and getting the quarterback they're hoping for. That's the other part of this. And I assume Houston will take a quarterback, right? Stroud or Young, whoever's there. By the way, Lovie Smith, I can't get it out of my head how much Lovie Smith just wins that final game and costs Houston the first pick. It's just
Lovie probably knew he was getting fired, so he's like, it ain't no never mind to me whether they get the number 1 quarterback or not. But
ultimate walk-off for him. Ultimate walk-off for him.
It is ultimate
because you're right. I would have fired him at halftime. I would have made sure I lost.
Get him out of here, man.
Anyways, yeah. So could they do that? Could the Cardinals and Monty Ossenfort, could they play it the right way to where they just move down 1 spot, get their top player on the board, non-quarterback, and get future asset? That might be the way to go, because they're not going to get a Carolina Panthers type haul for the third pick. I don't believe. Maybe, but I doubt it.
No, but anything that they would get, whether it be a future first or a second this year, To go down one pick, you can ask for a second round pick, especially if a team's coming up and get a quarterback, but you can probably push it to ask for a little bit more than that, even though you won't get it. The thing is though, they have to be very, very careful. And I'm interested to see if they'll do something prior to the draft. And the reason why I say that is because there's been some rumblings that Houston might not take a quarterback. That they might wait, for the future, or who's in love with Hendon Hooker. You know what I mean? And if Houston's one of those teams that can use a second round pick, if he lasts that long, or use the second round pick to get back up into the first round as bait to let somebody get him up there. So if they're not desperate to take a quarterback because they like Hendon Hooker down the line, this, that might be the move. The thing is, James, I always tell people the draft doesn't end in the first round, right? And your franchise doesn't go away if you don't get a quarterback this year. You'll have a chance to get another one next year. And I know we'll talk about these quarterbacks in next year's draft, but I think you got to be too careful for giving up too much for a dude that you don't know, or a person that you don't know may be a franchise guy. If you don't have that feeling about him, you can't give up assets in the future, because then it becomes a double whammy and the gift or the curse that keeps on giving.
No doubt. You can't get it wrong. I say all the time, I hammer it home on Locked On Bengals. Draft players, not positions. I hate it. I hate this. I'd rather the 8th ranked tackle over the running back. No, man. You know what's going to help you? Getting it right. Mm-hmm. And you're right. Like if you're DeMeco Ryans, if you take the wrong quarterback at 2, well, that's much, much worse than taking the right defensive end, or trading down and taking the right player there, and there's so many ors. And yet we look at this quarterback class, and we'll dive into it. But if you're Houston, I think it is intriguing, because I think there's going to be one guy from this class that ends up being pretty good, or really good, just based on odds. But is it going to be 3? Does it feel like that type of draft?
Historically, that's not the way that it happens. We know that.
It's just tough. So it's going to be interesting. And I think that the Cardinals, that's a big piece there, where the Raiders could want to leapfrog the Colts, because that's the other part of this. That's how the Cardinals, obviously they could sell it to the Colts. That's how you sell it to the rest of the league. Indianapolis is taking a quarterback. That's what you say to everybody. I don't know if they will at 4, but you want Anthony Richardson. Indy could take him. Indy could take him at 4. So you might as well move on up. And who knows if it's the Raiders or Titans or one of those teams.
The thing about the Cardinals, and I know people will disagree with me if they cover the team closely, but outside of quarterback, they might need everything except a free safety.
They need a lot, because they invested too much in linebacker, in safety. Yeah, the wrong positions.
I don't think there's a position on their football team that if they drafted the dude that they had as the best player outside of quarterback, that people will go, why'd you do that? That's redundant. I think they could literally use any and everybody. And they're a team that might consider, especially with Monty Ossenfort taking over, they're a team that might consider multiple trade downs. I'll go back one spot, right, and give up whatever, and then I won't have a guy. I'll go back again, and then I'll move back again. I'll end up somewhere at 16, 17, or 18 like that, and have a boatload of picks and maybe extra picks for next year, when, those picks will mean even more, because you'll have 2 franchise quarterbacks more than likely at the top of the draft.
And they still might be able to land a wide receiver if they trade down to 16, 17, 18. More on wide receivers coming up in just a second, but we've been talking about quarterbacks. We'll continue that conversation next. Today's show, though, is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. You've heard us talk about Ultimate Football GM before, and you get to control and manage every strategic aspect of your team, of your franchise. Like we just talked about, whether it's the draft, whether it's coaches, whether it is free agents, whether it's different rookies, whether it's you want to negotiate with contracts, you can do all of those things with Ultimate Football GM in a realistic, competitive game world. I've played this game. I love it. It's so much fun. And one of the best parts about it is the fact that you don't need internet access. You don't need service to use it. And so if you're taking a long flight cross country, or if you're driving across the country and your service is going to be in and out, well, guess what? You're going to be covered with Ultimate Football GM and be able to play and entertain yourself and maybe build the next dynasty. So make sure you take advantage right now, because Locked On NFL listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in all caps in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps. So make sure you check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com. That's ultimate-gm.com, or look it up in the App Store, Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today.
Running down here, segment 2 on Locked On NFL. James Rapien, it's him. Tony Wiggins, it's me right here. Hopefully you are subscribed and hit that YouTube button, that like button on YouTube as well. And make sure you catch us wherever you get all of your audio podcasts on every single platform. Now, we were talking about quarterbacks and we were talking about positions. A little bit of a disclaimer or something I have to let everybody know that leads to at least the way I think is this. These people do a whole bunch more research than we do. It's not going to come down to just scheme fit, not going to come down to athletic ability, it's not going to come down to exclusively all of those things. These interviews that are going on over and over and over again, especially when they're involving the owner, these decisions are going to come down to probably a gut feeling from a billionaire who is used to making decisions based on that gut feeling after he gets all of the information. It's almost as if you happen to envision this person, giving this person the keys to your franchise. And who do you want that guy to be on the field, off the field, in terms of his preparation? Quarterback, that's what it goes into, and that's what we're talking about. Now, with these other positions, more like you just imagine a guy, a big offensive lineman next to the rest of them, or you imagine, say, if you're Carolina, you got Derek Brown, you got Brian Burns. I imagine another guy like, right next to him, the best defensive tackle, or Will Anderson right on the other side. So you kind of want to see what your team looks like. But with quarterback, I think it gets a little bit deeper than that. And that's why choosing between these two, the two that we keep talking about may go number one, which is Stroud, and of course, kid from Alabama. Go ahead, Bryce. Right, Bryce Young. The thing is I'm sitting here thinking that it's not at this point about what they can do in terms of throwing the football. For both of them, and I'll give this to you, James, I don't think either one of them is going to be a bust. The question is whether or not they'll be great or franchise quarterbacks. I think the bust potential for the next two guys, which is Richardson and Levis, is way higher. I think at the very, very least, Stroud and Bryce Young will be competent NFL quarterbacks that play for a long time.
I think that's fair. I do, because you look at Young, and there's really just one issue. It's a big issue, but it's one issue. It's size. He's dynamic enough to me. I think he's got the arm talent. I think Definitely. That he's certainly a playmaker. All of those things, he's won at the highest level. All of those things, he checks all of those boxes. So it's a size issue. So as long as you have an offense that can scheme around a couple of those little, that flaw or the flaws that come with size at quarterback, I think you'll be fine. I don't think he's tiny. And maybe some will say that.
Relatively speaking, he's tiny though.
Yeah, but you worry about size as much with him as you would with Kyler?
I actually like him better than I like Kyler Murray. But it's just like Kyler, in terms of them absorbing a hit, no, they're built different. Like Russell Wilson's built like a little tank, man. I mean, even though he's short, he's got these big old legs. So when I say I worry about a guy who's small, I'm talking about a guy who has a smaller frame, like a Teddy Bridgewater, even though he was 6'1". We're always talking about how skinny he was. These dudes are big out here. So it's these collisions, and it's not necessarily a guy's knee buckling as much as it is a guy getting twisted around, and how much, a thinner frame like that can take. But we've seen smaller quarterbacks over the years. Joe Montana wasn't a big guy, and I know that's going back 30 years, but he wasn't a big muscular quarterback. Doug Flutie, guys that have played at a high level, all of them weren't really big. And of course, the ultimate little guy who was a Hall of Famer is Fran Tarkenton. But I do think because of the way the game is played now, being shorter doesn't matter as much because you're not talking about a guy standing in a pocket as much
Mhm.
as we have been in the past. You can talk about guys getting out of the pocket, and Drew Brees broke the mold because as long as you could sit here and sling the ball and you knew where the ball was going and you got it out quickly and you were able to process it through these lanes, it kind of eliminated all of that. So no, I'm not as concerned about it from the technical standpoint of being able to operate an NFL offense as much as I am just about the accidental bumps and bruises that come along with just playing the position.
Yeah, and I get that. And that's the part of it where you have to just trust the doctors and projections. And if you're just scared off by a size, you're scared off by a size. But outside of that, there's really nothing that's going to stop him. And so you saying he's going to end up being at least a competent quarterback, I think is fair. I think that's okay. Now, it's wild here because you're the Panthers. You moved up. Is that okay? You want that ceiling when you're taking the number one pick or the number one player in the draft anyways. I think he does have a pretty high ceiling. Now, will he reach it? I don't know. There are a lot of short quarterbacks that won't reach their ceiling or haven't reached their ceiling. Baker Mayfield, I thought, had a higher ceiling than, which it's funny, I'm mentioning ceiling when we're talking about quarterback heights, but ceiling than we saw, even when he won a playoff game, right? And so he never reached it. Tua, we'll see if he can reach it. Kyler certainly hasn't reached it for me. So that is the risk. Size is an issue. And then with Stroud, I just think he is one of these dudes that is just going to be able to stabilize things. You're right. Might not be great, but I think he can come in and be a solid starter for a long time. And the key to me, and the interesting thing is, because I think he can make every throw, they didn't run him a lot at Ohio State. Will he be able to use his legs a little bit at the next level? Will they be willing to let him use his legs a little bit? He did in that bowl game against Georgia, and it was effective. Because if you do that and you see this next phase of his game, maybe he's one of these guys that goes to the pros and you're like, oh, he had that in his bag? And he's able to do these things and suddenly becomes more of a playmaker and can go off script and do those things.
I just want a dude that can get away 2 or 3 times a game. I take Phillip Rivers in his prime right now, dude. I mean, I don't need a quarterback, even though the Jaguars have one and that's the team that I cover. I don't need a quarterback that has a getaway car that's going to make him escape 20 yards down the field. Now, if you have it, that's fine. But I do think the days of still having someone who knows how to manipulate the pocket, knows how to slide and kind of has this navigation system where they know when to get rid of the ball. I just don't want a quarterback that's going to constantly throw interceptions or get me in 3rd and long because he holds on to the ball too long and he can't get away from people. So it's a big difference between having a dude that has the mobility of Michael Vick or Lamar Jackson and then having somebody who can't run at all. And I think sometimes that's where we go when we listen to these evaluations. It's either one extreme or the other. Well, no, all I need is a dude to just get away a little bit every now and then. Just, he doesn't have to be as slick with it as Joe Burrow. He doesn't have to be as great with it as Josh Allen. And he doesn't have to be Patrick Mahomes where he's spending. Patrick Mahomes has spoiled a lot of people, just like Steph Curry, to think that you can just come across the timeline and pull up like him and Dame. Everybody can't do that. And most coaches don't even coach and call plays with the hopes that you do that stuff. They don't even want you doing it if you're not capable. They just want you to be able to get away from the traffic a little bit, extend the play enough to get the ball out.
And that is something I think he can do. And so ultimately, I think we agree. They're going to go 1 and 2. It feels like Bryce Young is the favorite. I thought people were sleeping on C.J. Stroud a few months ago. Like it was like, oh, Bryce Young. I'm like, Stroud's a contender for the first pick. And who knows? Maybe he does end up going 1. But I think these are the top 2 guys. Pick 1, pick 2. And then going back to what we started the show with, it's going to be interesting to see what the Cardinals do. Because I could see Anthony Richardson going 3. I really could. And there's no way. I know this doesn't matter, really, when it comes to football. I can't take a dude that puts mayo in his coffee. And that's Will Levis. You see that guy?
Yeah, man.
I mean, come on, man.
He'd be perfect for the Titans, by the way, since they love mayonnaise so much up there, right? Just
Oh,
go ahead and send him to the Tennessee Titans. That would be
he ate a banana with the peel still on it.
yeah. You can have
Did you
all
see
that
that?
stuff. No, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I eat lemon zest. I probably eat apple peelings, but I ain't eating no banana. I've actually tasted banana peel by accident. It's not very good. So I don't know how he was able to do that. And now he puts mayonnaise. I tell you what I do now. Every now and then I do marinate my meat in mayonnaise because it puts. Never mind. We'll talk about that. We're talking a lot about quarterbacks. Let's talk in segment 3 about guys in the draft that the quarterbacks throw the ball to. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On NFL.
Before we dive into the receivers, and I want to because I love receivers, Hendon Hooker, is there any chance he goes ahead of Will Levis?
Yes.
I think so too. I think
I don't
there's
know how
a
big of a
sneaky
chance, but yeah, you say there is a chance. Yeah, I heard there are a lot of people that like Hendon Hooker, and that Will Levis has some mechanical issues. That while guys in the NFL love coaching mechanical or coaching issues out of players and coaching good habits into them, the habits that I heard he has should have been gotten rid of by a guy who was in his second year of college. And that is, you got to aim, you got to turn your feet the way you throw the ball to. And he does stuff that you're not supposed to do. And we have had enough of people sitting here bragging about guys throwing off timing or off script.
off platform.
You remember that they talked about that about Sam not Sam Bradford,
Darnold.
Sam Darnold. I mean, it's all we heard with these experts, these guys that actually played the position. All we heard was he throws off platform and he does stuff beyond the X's and O's. But the problem is he doesn't throw on platform. And the problem is he doesn't do things that are not
The easy
beyond
stuff.
the X's and O's. Right.
And that's what these two guys do that are going to go 1 and 2.
Right.
They do the easy stuff.
Exactly.
And that gets you pretty far in the NFL. Speaking of, at least making it look easy, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, really since the combine, when he showed off his quickness, he didn't run the 40 in Indy, but when he showed off his quickness and tested elite at the 3 cone, right? I'm like, oh, this dude is going top 15.
Yep.
And then you hear Senior Bowl director Jim Nagy saying that he's hearing that there's only one, that there are numerous teams that only have one first-round grade at wide receiver, Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Do you buy that? Because here's the thing. If that's the case, if there's only one of these dudes, and a lot of teams view it that way, to me, that means if you have he's the 20th player on your board, Jaxon Smith-Njigba. And I think he's higher than that on a lot of teams' boards. You're going to take him earlier than that because you know that's the only one. And you're not going to be able to address it later with a player anywhere near that caliber. I could see Jaxon Smith-Njigba going into this week. I thought top 10 would not shock me now. If a team moves up, if teams are aggressive, he might go top 7. I mean, he may go much higher than people think.
He just might. And let me tell you how I'm glad this is happening for him, because he caught a lot of grief by not playing in the national championship game. And then so he kind of made people understand why, when they saw where he actually was. He didn't run the 40 and all of that. He's, man, I'm just really getting myself back in shape. I'm not trying to do that, but I can do some routes. The thing is though, he kind of took a bit of a lump there, and then he took a lump because he was on the sideline and Marvin Harrison Jr. got hurt, and then Georgia made their run because the other, Stroud ran out of targets, and Georgia could pool all of their coverages one way. So he took a little bit of a beating, and there were people saying, he's not going to run, and all the experts was on TV saying most people don't consider him elite, so he probably hurt himself by not playing. You're talking about a guy who thought he was in the top 15, who went down to the top 45, and then he shows up and he runs those routes like a veteran receiver. And then now you have this compared to, everybody loves Terry McLaurin. Everybody loved the way Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson took over, as rookies. They were the 2 best rookie wide receivers in the league last year. They came in ready to play. And then folks asked Brian Hartline, who has played in the NFL, and people know him very well, who are the guys? He says, out of all the guys I've coached here, Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best, and probably JSN, Jaxon Smith-Njigba. And then you had Garrett Wilson, and like, man, he's the best athlete I've ever seen. And now all of a sudden, all of those negative things that have been said about this kid, and he's right back where he's always been, like he's the number 1 high school player in the country. He's right back in the graces because they've seen it. I think he comes into the NFL and he is ready to catch 80 passes right away. I think he is a really, really good candidate to be a dude that thrusts himself in the top 10, top 12 receivers in the league immediately. I'm not calling him Jamar Chase because I don't think he's that dynamic, but I do think he's like Jamar Chase in this way. The first time he steps on the field, well, your boy had the drops, but after he got rid of the drops, the first time Jamar Chase stepped on the field, he did not seem like he was beneath it. He didn't seem like he was a rookie. He seemed like he'd been playing football his whole life. And I think Njigba has the same quality. I think the day he steps on an NFL field, he is not only going to belong, but he's going to excel.
And to Chase's credit, the first regular season game, there were no drops.
Nope.
Yeah, there were no drops. It was all
when it mattered. He did it right.
He ended it very, very quickly. And yeah, I look at this top 10, and Jaxon Smith-Njigba visited Atlanta. That's interesting. Chicago, interesting to me. Philly, could they go that route? I don't know. It would be interesting. I mean, so that's teams in the top 10, the back half of the top 10. But what if Arizona moved down? What if they moved down to 7? You telling me they wouldn't be in on a guy like Jaxon Smith-Njigba for Kyler Murray? Wide receivers are valuable. So I could see him going anywhere there. I don't think Seattle would do it necessarily. I think they're in the mix for some big time trench players and or a quarterback. Detroit, who knows, right? Could you imagine him and Jameson Williams? Jameson Williams transferred from Ohio State to get on the field to Alabama. But could you imagine? I don't think they need him. Obviously, they also have what's his name in Detroit?
Amon-Ra.
Amon-Ra St. Brown. Could you imagine that? I think Amon-Ra St. Brown and Njigba are kind of redundant, but
I think he's a little twitchier. But yeah. Amon-Ra kind of reminds me of Hines Ward a little bit, right? And I just told you who Njigba reminds me. Njigba reminds me, if the Patriots could ever have him, he'd be the most dynamic slot receiver they ever had. And that includes Wes Welker. I'm talking about from a talent perspective. So the value that he adds also is this, bro. We talk so much about the formula to winning. There's no bigger formula to winning than getting first downs. Because you keep the ball, you tire out the defense, and you allow your defense to rest. He is going to be a guy that is going to be a first down maker. That's just what he's going to do. He's going to find those spots, and every now and then, when you think all he's going to do is be a little slot guy, he's going to put that stinky leg on you. He's going to shoot down the seam, and he can catch it and get deep as well. So really, man, you're making an absolute great point. Now, to Nagy's point, I've heard a lot about Quentin Johnston. It depends on who the teams are picking. If a team wants to, if somebody just flat out needs speed and playmaking, are they going to take Flowers?
Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers is interesting to me, man. I think
he is. He is. And you know another guy that's interesting to me, another guy that I think is going to get a lot of first downs, Dobbs at North Carolina. I just think Josh
Downs. Talking about Downs?
Josh Downs, I mean, yeah. Josh Downs. Downs at North Carolina is going to be, I've got Josh Dobbs on my head because he almost beat the Jaguars in the playoffs. But Downs is sort of just like that. He's another dude that's going to be ready to play because of his ability to run those routes, to be able to catch the ball with his hands and then take it and turn up the field. And even if he doesn't go a long ways, he's going to go far enough. And he's got a little tight, little strong body that's already ready to play in the NFL. So don't think that. I think towards the back end of that first round, watch the Steelers with Josh Downs because they did a lot of research on him. And I know I think they got the Bears pick, the first pick in the second round. See if they move up to make sure they get the 5th-year option at the end of that first and start. It might call y'all. I doubt if they call you guys. But they might get around 29, around 30 and get him. So that definitely qualifies as a first-round pick, though. But I tell you what, if only one goes in the first round, then there's going to be the night between Thursday and Friday, you're going to see nothing but people jockeying up trying to get these names that we just mentioned.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Receivers are more valuable now than ever. And Jaxon Smith-Njigba leads the pack. But I could see Zay going. I could see Johnston going, like you said, and it's going to be fun.
And Downs or Dobbs, or both of them. Maybe both of them will go. Whoever Dobbs.
Maybe both of them will go. We're going to find out round 1, 15 days away. If you're listening to this, watching this on Wednesday, thank you so much for listening and watching. Subscribe on YouTube, follow wherever you get your podcast. And for Tony Wiggins, I'm James Rapien. Thank you so much for listening to the Locked On NFL podcast.